Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to episode 18 of season 14 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown, and this is the only weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Okay, as you can see by the title of the episode, I'm introducing another new series within the podcast. So, here's the truth, I'm not ready to start Mojo yet. I had hoped to schedule a couple of interviews before the end of this season, but it's been hard to wrangle schedules, so as much as anything, I'm giving myself a little bit of time here before I do start season 15. So I was sitting around thinking about what I could put out to give you something hopefully interesting to listen to, and I figured, why not talk about covers of Tom Petty songs? These can be shorter episodes with a slightly different format, and I'll explain what that format is before we start. Before that, though, the title of the series is Recovering Petty. And I took this name from the outstanding podcast Recovering Queen. On that show, the hosts pick a different Queen song every episode and record a full cover of it. Ordinarily, they attempt to recreate the cover as faithfully as possible and then talk about what the most challenging aspects of that were, as it often reveals even more complexity or brilliance than appears on the surface. So thanks to Ian, Matt, and Jay for the inspiration behind the name of this series. So with Recovering Petty, I'm talking about other people's interpretations of Tom's songs, and that's going to be limited to a specific criteria. I want to listen to and comment on covers that take the songs into different areas, so I'm not going to touch on very straight, very faithful covers like Chris Stapleton's I Should Have Known It. I don't think there would be very much to say about that one, as it's almost a note-for-note reproduction of the original. And as John Paulson and I talked about when we covered Petty Country and the Bad Monkey soundtrack, I'm not always a huge fan of completely faithful covers being recorded. Live, I can enjoy them, and lots of the tribute bands do fantastic versions that are not completely faithful, but stick well within the sort of same rails as the original. But on record, I want to hear an artist put their own spin on a song. So these episodes will be limited to artists who change, adapt, or inhabit Tom's music in some way and make it their own. I'll also be putting out a call to all you listeners to recommend covers that fit this criteria for me to cover on future installments. As always, there's a link in the episode notes so that you can go give the song a full listen before we start the podcast, and then perhaps again afterwards to see if any of my commentary makes you think about the song in a different way, or if you just completely disagree with my take on it, which is super cool too when that happens. Okay, well, let's dive in. This is Phoebe Bridgers' cover of It'll All Work Out, and I'm going to play just a little bit of it for you right now.
She wore faded jeans and soft black leather. She had eyes so blue, they looked like weather. When she needed me, I wasn't around. That's the way it goes. It'll all work out.
Phoebe Bridgers was born in Pasadena, California in 1994, and despite being associated with the modern indie folk movement, her musical DNA reaches back to the classic singer-songwriter tradition. She grew up in a house full of records by Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, Jackson Browne, Hank Williams, and the Pretenders, and she's frequently cited Elliott Smith as perhaps her single biggest songwriting influence. She attended the Los Angeles County High School for the Arts, briefly played bass in the punk band Sloppy Jane, and immersed herself in the LA indie scene rather than attending Berklee College of Music where she'd been accepted. And while many artists her age were chasing pop production, Bridgers gravitated towards sparse arrangements, careful lyricism, and emotional honesty, and critics immediately drew comparisons to Elliott Smith, Leonard Cohen, and even early Jackson Browne, not because she sounded like these artists, but because she approached songwriting with the same literary focus and maturity. Her debut album, Stranger in the Alps, arrived in September 2017 and immediately established her as one of the most exciting new songwriters of her generation. The record was built around songs she'd been refining for years and balanced haunting ballads like Funeral alongside the unexpectedly catchy Motion Sickness. And although it wasn't a commercial blockbuster at first, the album became one of the defining indie releases of the decade through word of mouth and critical acclaim. On October 2nd, 2018, she issued a new digital deluxe version of the album with 2 additional tracks. One was a demo of Motion Sickness, and the other was the song that we're talking about today, It'll All Work Out. Now, way back in May 2023, when I covered the original version of this song, I wrote, I think this is likely the best song on the album, despite it being very short, being a very simple arrangement, and featuring only Mike and Tom. For his part, in Conversations with Tom Petty, Tom tells author Paul Zolo, I brought it to Mike's house, giving him the cassette. He had a studio at his house, and I said, could you just make this a record, because I don't have time. I can't deal with it mentally, but I think it's a really good song. And that's never happened before or since. So not only do we have this incredible song with this heartfelt and devastatingly sad lyric, but we also have this unusual situation where Tom effectively hands off complete musical control to Mike. And in a kind of sort of way that almost fits the brief of this sort of special series that I'm doing on the podcast, where Mike's having to interpret Tom's song himself. Now, of course, Mike's so close to Tom that you would expect him to get it to a place that Tom might have ended up at anyway. But this is what I want to do in this series. How do you interpret Tom Petty? Maybe this completely detached approach to how this song was composed and arranged lends itself well to interpretation, or maybe Phoebe Bridgers just has the perfect musical sensibility to take this one on, because immediately as her version starts, you know that this is not going to be a light, insubstantial interpretation, and you also know immediately that this isn't a straightforward treatment of any part of the material. Rather than the cascade of mandolin, ukulele, and guitar, we're treated to some warm synth pads, and I think in one case possibly reversed, to give us that backmasked type of feel, before Bridges' clean-toned electric guitar comes in. There's a very ominous electronic drum pad underneath, acting as the kick, and a beautiful swirling flange-type effect that moves in and out of focus on the guitar. Now, we often use the word ethereal to describe music, and it's most definitely the only word that really works in this instance. In sharp contrast to the original, the mood here is much darker and softer around the edges. It feels looser. And if I had to draw a comparison to the way the guitar is being used, I'd probably think about Jeff Buckley and the way he treated his magnificent version of Hallelujah, especially in the intro. The chords are all there, but the changes aren't always exactly where you'd expect them, and the notes on the fretboard are moved from one chord to the next individually in some cases rather than all together in a voicing. It gives the piece a very dreamy fatigue that builds up a wonderful tension before Bridges' exceptional vocal comes in. And it's that vocal that really makes this song as good as it is. The waltz time in the original really feels like one. Tom hits the first beat of each bar closely, and the song has a much more focused urgency to it than Bridges' cover. And the tempo of the original is much quicker than the cover we're listening to as well. The original, from Light Me Up I've Had Enough, clocks in at around 137 beats per minute, where this version cuts the pace right down to about 118 beats per minute. And over top of that, Bridges really lets her vocal crawl lazily over the beat rather than hitting that one every time. She's sometimes on the beat, but more often behind it, letting the last word or words of the line drift past the end of the bar. In this way, she gives the song a very specific spontaneity. It gives it a much more, sort of stream of consciousness delivery. It's hesitant and it's unsure. The other thing she does is drop the key a full step down from F to G, but not quite F. The guitar is ever so slightly sharp, so if you're playing along to the record, you'd have to tweak your tuning to get it spot on. So I don't know if that was done with the tuning on the guitar and then the other instruments, or if it was done in post by speeding up or slowing down the tape very slightly. But again, it's another wonderful little detail that is brought in for a specific purpose. Her voice would sound just as good in G, but in F, more of that delicate lower register that she has is allowed to come through. At the end of the first verse, rather than go back to the root, she leaves us without resolution in that suspended fourth chord in the turnaround. In the second verse, the harmony vocal is added, and it's such an understated way to build the song that it becomes so much more impactful because of that subtlety. Bridges' voice has so much personality that the dubbed harmony almost feels like an inner echo as the narrator's ruminations bounce back to them. And look, I'm always a sucker for a harmony part that is lower than the main melody. And again, she resists the urge to do the obvious and add in a high harmony that would be more flashy, more noticeable. But as her voice sits underneath the main line and crisscrosses between harmony and vocal, it's a texture that warms the entire piece without muddying it or taking away from that fantastic lead vocal performance. There's a gentle build on the synths into the bridge section. It'll all work out eventually. Better off with him than here with me. And again, that second vocal part begins just doubling the melody line before subtly moving to the harmony part on the line here with me. There's such small adjustments that you don't really notice them on first or second listen. It's only when you really zoom in that you see how many little subtle changes are being added. Leading into the last verse, there's some backmasked or, that kind of effect and some slightly distorted guitar, again over that suspended fourth chord, before the arrangement drops back to let Bridges' voice really punch home the line. Now the wind is high, and the rain is heavy, and the water's rising in the levee. And I talk lots on the show about moments in songs, and this is the moment in this song for me.
Now the wind is high and the rain is heavy. The water's rising in the levee.
The slight tremolo added to the vocal on the words "water's rising" and how she pushes the vocal forward more and gives it a bit more oxygen really punctuates this sense of being completely overwhelmed by emotion that's being metaphorically expressed in this section. And behind this line, the synth adds in a little more colour over top of a very subtle running water sort of sound effect or sound capture, but nothing's being overdone. We're not being bludgeoned by any part of this arrangement. We're just being carried by it very gently. The song ends with a repeat of the line, "Never goes away, but it all works out," with the vocal being so close mic'd, you can really hear that T being fully pronounced. The synths then descend over that fourth bass note, and the song evaporates into thin air as if it were never there in the first place.
Never goes away, but it all works out.
Okay, why do I love this version so much? First of all, it was one of the truly brilliant hidden deep cuts that I stumbled across during my journey with this podcast. I definitely must have heard it when I, started my deep dive into Tom Petty's catalogue and got to Let Me Up If I'd Enough, but for some reason I must have just overlooked it. When listening to the album again ahead of season 7, it became the standout track on the record for me. So, first of all, the song itself is among Tom's best ballads in my opinion. Next up, the arrangement is so starkly different and yet so interesting. It's faithful to the heart of the song without ever mimicking it or taking the easy route. We have lush synths straying away from the prescribed chord progression and backmasked guitars and reverse wave synth tones that really ramp up the sense of unease and despair. Lastly, but most importantly, we have Phoebe Bridges' voice itself, which is the hill that this cover is born, lives, and dies on. It's such an immaculately controlled, honest, and emotionally vulnerable delivery that you simply can't help but be drawn to it. And this type of vocal control, especially in this lower register where she's sitting in a lot of this song, coupled with the enormous personality and believability, is why I'm also drawn to Amelia McLean, who I talked on the show about 18 months ago. I had her on the show, and then again I had a chat with her just after her album was released. And in the same way with Amelia McLean, once I sort of went back and started listening to Stranger in the Alps and Phoebe Bridges in general, when you discover a vocalist who doesn't hide behind theatrics or overstatement and can maintain extraordinary pitch control without sacrificing emotion or believability in this way, you hold on to those vocalists and you cherish them. The ache and the longing in this performance is an absolute tour de force, and as well as creating one of the most interesting, vital covers of any of Tom's songs, Bridges also creates a work that dovetails beautifully with the rest of her superb debut album in this re-release format. The only downside to this cover is that Tom himself never got to hear it. I'm positive that he would have been blown away by it. Okay, Pettyheads, that's it for this week. Now, at this point in regular episodes of the show, I sum up and I give my rating. So I was trying to figure out how I should do this. If I gave the original song a 6, could I give a cover a 7 or an 8? Is that saying that the cover's better than the original? Not really in my mind. And what if the cover falls flat, but the song is one of Tom's best? So where I landed is this. I'm going to evaluate it on 2 criteria. Does the artist clearly understand what the song is and keep the spirit and heart of it intact? In short, is the artist treating the song with respect? In this case, with startling clarity, this is a very obvious yes. Second of all, does the artist change the song and make it their own to the extent that, if you didn't know the original, you could believe it was an original composition by that artist. Again, I don't think anyone could argue that this doesn't sound like a Phoebe Bridgers song. So I'm starting off the Recovering Petty series in the most emphatic way possible and giving this version of It'll All Work Out an unreserved 10 out of 10. The Tom Petty Project is a proud member of the Boneless Podcasting Network, which is a loose collective of podcasting friends and acquaintances brought together and championed by the inimitable Chaz Charles. Go check out the roster by clicking on the link in the episode notes, and you can also check out my other podcasts on the network, Seaside Pod Review, a Queen podcast that I record with my very best friend Randy Woods, who performs all the music that you hear in the podcast. And you can check out the Ultimate Catalog Clash that I co-host with my great pal Corey Morissette. We are currently covering the 4 huge albums by In Excess: Listen Like Thieves, Kick, X, and Welcome to Wherever You Are. We recorded an episode this week that was an absolute just chaos. There was an accident during the recording, which was very, very funny and made me laugh a lot. So go check that out. And don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at The Tom Petty Project, and on Blue Sky at Tom Petty Project. Go follow, like, subscribe as applicable, do all those things. And again, please leave a review or a rating if you haven't done that already. Keep talking to me on social media, and I'll keep reading out as many of your comments as I can on the show. And as your weekly reminder, the Tom Petty Project is not affiliated with the Tom Petty Estate in any way. So, when you're looking for Tom's music, please visit official streaming platforms, or better yet, go to your local independent record seller to grab some actual physical media. If you're looking for official merchandise, go to store.tompetty.com. And if you're looking for merch for this show, please go to store.tompettyproject.com. Don't forget to check out the Tom Petty Nation and Tom Petty Fans Forever groups on Facebook. Lastly, make sure you're listening to Tom Petty Radio on Channel 31 on Sirius XM. Until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week, hopefully chatting to another human being about music. Bye-bye.